Hi, fantasy readers. This is Karyne Norton, your fellow book binger, and you are listening to the Finding Fantasy Reads podcast, where you can test out a new fantasy story every single week to find your next favorite author. This week, we're jumping right into part 2 of 3 of Tara Grayce's Beauty and the Beast retelling. So if you haven't already listened to part 1, you'll want to back up and do that first. Tara Grayce writes humorous fantasy with a dash of romance. And when she isn't drinking tea and writing about elves, she's renovating her 100-year-old farmhouse and spending time with her chocolate lab, Miss Kisses. I actually saw on Instagram that she recently had her dog tested, and they were able to break it down to show the 6 breeds that make up her DNA. I think that's so fun, and because you all have seen how embarrassingly unfamiliar I am with dog breeds, I'll point out that I only knew 2 of the 6 breeds. Stick around to the end, or check out today's show notes to see where you can find more from Tara, as well as how to enter our Romantasy audiobook giveaway. For now, please enjoy Torn Curtains, Part 2 by Tara Grayce. Chapter 5. On how the plan worked a little too well. The house party broke up at the end of the week. Even though I closely watched Mr. Doyle when I safely could, I didn't detect any further suspicious activity. Nor did any of the other guests appear suspicious, besides Lady Ethelwyle's love of gory and gothic novels, though I couldn't entirely blame her. At her age, she deserved a bit of excitement in her life. Before 2 weeks had passed, Lord Warnwick received his own invitations to house parties in the area. It seems now that word of his gracious acceptance of his plight had gone out. Everyone was eager to curry his favor and get the latest gossip about him straight from the source. When Lord Warnwick left for his first house party, I gave instructions to Mr. Fenton to drop a hint to the servants at the manor where the Lord would be staying that a cure for Lord Warnwick's curse had been found in true love. It was time to start the next phase and make him the darling of London even before he arrived there for the season. That part of the plan went a little too well indeed. The romance of the thought of a beast being transformed back into a man from sheer force of love captured the imagination of the matrons and their daughters. I couldn't blame them. That was exactly the sort of response I had wanted. No sooner did Lord Warnwick return from his first house party than we had callers. Even Lady Wilson returned several times, escorted by Mr. Doyle. As far as I could tell, Mr. Doyle didn't do anything suspicious on these return visits. Lord Warnwick's frequent travels gave me more time to catch up on my reading of the magical books I'd borrowed from his library. With him and most of the staff gone with him, there wasn't as much to do in the house. I was halfway through the book on transformations, and I had finished most of the other books on the basics of magic. It had taken a bit of practice, but I was beginning to be able to sense the distant hum of magic that lay under everything like a natural vibration that all things had. Apparently, magiologists learned to hear and understand that hum so that they could direct its energy into their spells. I opened one of the magic spell books and arranged the necessary ingredients in my room. I had decided I wanted to try a strengthening spell on my dress. With all my scrubbing on hands and knees, I was beginning to wear spots into the front of my skirt. My apron mostly covered them, but it would be better if they didn't happen at all. A strengthening spell required something of iron, the thing I wanted strengthened, and the carefully worded incantation. I fixed my gaze on my work dress, dressed in my old rose-patterned brocade while I cast the spell, and said the words from the book. There was the most dreadful popping noise. The vibrations around me grew worse and worse until I couldn't breathe. My teeth ached and clattered together. My eardrums shot pain into my skull. I felt whatever tenuous pull I had on those vibrations fly out of my grasp. Blackness slammed into me. When I woke, I was lying on my bed, a cool cloth on my forehead. I peeled my eyes open and met a pair of yellow slitted cat eyes peering down at me. What? I bolted upright, but Lord Warnwick's furry paw rested on my shoulder and pushed me back down. What was he doing in my room? And here? Hadn't he been invited to Admiral Billingsley's house to dine with him and some of the other admirals and their wives? Who were in Portsmouth at this time of year? A pudgy man was placing items back in a black bag. The physician, I assumed. I'm fine, I said, trying to sit up again. Yes, you are, now that I've stitched your head wound. The physician didn't even look up as he snapped his bag closed. Head wound? Now that he mentioned it, the back of my head throbbed more than the rest of me. You hit your head when you fell. Lord Warnwick paced next to my bed. Thankfully, Mrs. Dentley had some accounts she wanted you to check, and she found you in time to stop the bleeding. She sent for the physician and for me. I was on my way home and arrived post-haste. Good thing, too. It took him nearly an hour to unravel the backlash of magic wrapped around you. The physician shook his head. I couldn't stitch up the wound until all that magical residue was taken away. Quite the shaky time there for a few minutes. Magical residue? I sank back onto the pillow and squeezed my eyes shut against the ringing in my ears and throbbing in my skull. My spell. Something had gone wrong with it. But what? I'd done exactly as the book had instructed. When the doctor left, Lord Warnwick returned to a seat in the one chair in the room, leaving the door open for propriety's sake. What were you thinking, attempting a spell on your own with no formal training to speak of? But I read all the books. I studied. It shouldn't have gone wrong. I glanced toward the pile of books now on my nightstand rather than scattered on the bed. He sighed and ran his claws through his mane. If I thought you were going to attempt magic on your own without coming to me first, I wouldn't have let you borrow them. Magic isn't something you can just jump into without formal training. Because I'm a woman. I tried not to sound too bitter about that. It seemed like everything I was curious about, whether it was mathematics or sciences or magic, was considered beyond me because I had been born a woman. No, you have an excellent mind. That isn't the problem. A boy would have had the same problem you did. Lord Warnwick's mane was now standing straight up with all his claw raking. Magic is a tricky, powerful thing. If you don't match the vibration and cadence of your spell to the rhythm of the magic you are working with on that particular day, it will fall apart and cause backlash like you experienced. Boys at Oxford and Cambridge spent their first 2 years of magical study doing nothing but becoming in tune with feeling magic and attempting small things, like moving a small pebble from their desk onto their neighbor's desk. They don't attempt a strengthening spell right off. That involves advanced training, as you are taking the properties of one thing and blending it onto something else. I settled back against the covers. I had been foolish in attempting it by myself. In my eagerness to learn and my own arrogance, I had injured myself. I see. No, I don't think you do. Backlash like that can be fatal. If you'd attempted something even bigger, I might not have been able to untangle the magic quickly enough for the physician to do his work. Lord Warnwick was right, though I understood more than he thought I did. Magiologists died on ships, often from overextending themselves, or even backlash if they attempted something bigger than they could handle. I should have realized this would be something too big for me. But I was arrogant. I thought I could just learn what I needed to know with careful study of books, without the aid of anyone else. Then again, books were often all I had for learning. It had been a long time since anyone had been willing to truly teach me something I was interested in knowing. I apologize for my arrogance and foolishness. It won't happen again. I'll return the books to your library as soon as I am able. Lord Warnwick studied me with his yellow eyes, the same way he'd done the day he'd hired me. What did he see in me? A woman of reduced means now working as a servant in his house. A girl foolish enough to attempt magic on her own without training. An arrogant woman who, even as a servant, didn't remember her place more often than not. He gave his squeaky cough. What if I were to train you? Train me? I gaped and half sat back up. Why would he offer to train me? I was nothing to him. Just his servant. The daughter of the wounded admiral who had torn down Lord Warnwick's curtains. A curtain dress I was still wearing beneath the covers. Yes, train you. You seem to have some potential for it. Even with the backlash, I could tell that the spell you attempted started to work. With more magical strength built up through practice, you could easily accomplish that spell. That is something it takes boys starting out in their studies several years to master. I was flattered, even though I had to remind myself that those boys were also younger than I was and were studying many things at the same time as magiology. They were also going about it in the correct way, rather than my impulsive one. I would be honored to learn from you, my lord. I gave him a nod. It would have to do instead of a curtsy, considering my current position. Mrs. Dentley bustled into the room, carrying a tray with a steaming teapot and teacup. My lord, Miss Clampton needs her rest. Of course. Lord Warnwick stood to leave the room. I settled back against the covers. Magical backlash could be exhausting. My magical training began in fits and starts as the rest of the month progressed. Lord Warnwick only had a few days here and there between his house parties and entertaining. As my plan succeeded a little too well, I couldn't complain. It was my idea, after all. But the real test would come when we went to London for the season. Chapter 6. On how we started the season. After our preparations and plans, the season still came sooner than expected. Next thing I knew, I was organizing the household's move to Lord Warnwick's townhouse. I also had to organize my father's house. While I was still able to look after them during my half-days off, since Downshead Hall was so close to Portsmouth, London would be much farther away. I wasn't sure how my family would survive without me to oversee it. Father seemed confused that I was leaving, even when I tried to explain. But it was sometimes hard to tell with him how much he understood nowadays. Lord Warnwick's house was a tall, stately grey stone edifice. The rooms were well appointed, with much better draperies than Downshead. Thankfully, my father hadn't stumbled across this house, or he might have caused much more damage. In the mornings, Lord Warnwick went out and met with fellow members of Parliament and discussed matters of state. From what I gathered, things on the peninsula were growing worse. Our boys under Wellington were hard-pressed, and it looked likely that they might be overrun if something wasn't done. Perhaps it would be wiser to withdraw, but doing so would cede control of the entire continent to Napoleon. In the afternoons, we were flooded with invitations by matrons and their daughters to balls and afternoon teas. Lord Warnwick did his best to mingle with most of them, but he admitted he didn't enjoy it. Miss Henderson fainted at the sight of me. Lord Warnwick slouched in a chair by the fire in the parlor. His booted paws stuck out at an odd angle. She is one less to be shocked when you attend the ball in 2 days. I flipped the page in the magic book I was studying. It was one filled with exercises designed to help the user expand their magical strength. He huffed. I'm not sure I should attend the ball. Balls are a waste of time when so many more momentous things are happening in the world. I'm not sure I can even dance correctly. I looked up at that. It would be a bit difficult to dance when a body's limbs now bent in ways they hadn't before. I see. Perhaps some practice would be in order. I don't play, but Mary does. Would you like me to call her in, and we'll see how many dances you can safely perform? Even if you can only master 1 or 2 of them, you'll at least go to the ball knowing which ones you can still dance reasonably well, and which ones it would be better to sit out. A sound suggestion, Miss Clampton. Lord Warnwick stood, and I called for Mary. She was more than happy to take a break from kitchen duties to play. While she sat down at the pianoforte and laid out her music, Lord Warnwick approached me and held out his paw. Would you do me the honor of dancing with me? Of course, my lord. I took his paw and let him lead me to the middle of the room. He was on the tall side, yet not terribly so. I'd never met him before his transformation, but I assumed he was still the same height now as he had been before. Mary started with a reel. It was an easy enough one to follow, and Lord Warnwick turned out to be an adept dancer. As we progressed through each of the standard dances used at balls, only the waltz turned out to be any issue. As Lord Warnwick's customized boots added a few inches beyond the toes to make his feet appear more human, he tended to step on my feet whenever we got too close in the waltz steps. Finally, I sank into a chair by the fire. That settles it then. As long as you avoid the waltz or any dances where you have to get too close to your partner, you'll succeed masterfully. Lord Warnwick sat down across from me. Thank you for the chance to practice. There was something warm in his tone, and in his yellow eyes, though I wasn't sure what to make of that. I wouldn't dare begin to consider it friendship, though my magical training with him had caused me to spend more time with him than most servants would. But he was an earl, and I was a servant now. What was I even thinking? He was an earl, and he was a beast captured in the throes of this spell. Until that spell was lifted, and he was restored to his former humanity, he couldn't form an attachment with anyone. I couldn't believe our own story, that there was hope for breaking the spell through true love. That wasn't how magic worked. Nor was there all that much hope for him. The magiologists at Oxford hadn't been able to solve the problem. If they couldn't solve a magical problem, who could? Certainly not me, a novice who was just learning how to prevent my own spells from backlashing. I waited up the night of the ball. I wasn't sure why I did. I wasn't his mother. I wasn't even officially a housekeeper who should be awake and on hand when the Lord arrived in case he needed anything. But I was in the parlor, trudging through that dense book on transformations, when I heard his claws click on the front steps and the door open. That couldn't be a good sign if he had taken off his boots and stockings and returned to bare paws. He only did that if he wanted to be comfortable rather than proper. I tried to appear casual as I tiptoed from the library. Mr. Fenton was helping him take off his coat and hat. I clasped my hands in front of me. How did it go? Lord Warnwick's pink nostrils flared. Not well. Lady Gallagher is allergic to cats. Oh. I calculated the sort of scandal something like that could cause. Yes, and a few of the other ladies and gentlemen had sneezing attacks, though none as bad as Lady Gallagher. She began to have trouble breathing and had to retire early. I decided to leave shortly afterwards to minimize the scene. Lord Warnwick shuddered and flexed his cat's paws. I may have undone all your months of planning. Not something you could help. He wasn't at fault for being turned into a giant cat, nor could he be blamed for the allergic attacks of others. But would society see it that way? Or would he be the subject of horrible scandal once again? The next morning, Lady Wilson, Mr. Doyle, and a few other members of the gentry called as soon as it was socially acceptable. I hovered out of sight, once again listening in. Lady Wilson sipped at her tea. Wasn't that such a disgraceful display last night by Lady Gallagher? Sneezing and coughing all over. Such unladylike behavior. The poor lady couldn't help it. Lord Warnwick gripped his teacup in his claws, trying to sip daintily with his fangs getting in his way. No, of course not, Mr. Doyle agreed. He eyed Lord Warnwick. You will undoubtedly absent yourself from such occasions from now on. Even from my hidden nook, I could see the scruff on the back of Lord Warnwick's neck rise. I have yet to decide. Perhaps this year, sneezing will become fashionable. Lady Wilson let out a peal of high-pitched, squeaky laughter. Maybe. With your fortune, Lord Warnwick, many a matron and her daughter will promptly embrace their allergic reactions. Lord Warnwick shifted in his chair uncomfortably. Of course, he, like me, knew that the whole fall in love and break the spell rumor was something we started and completely untrue. Were we wrong in giving so many girls false hopes, as Lord Warnwick had worried when I'd first ventured this scheme? Perhaps we were. But what else could we do? We needed to find out who the person or persons were who had afflicted Lord Warnwick with this curse, and what their motives were. And we needed to make sure Lord Warnwick kept his influence to help the vote to support naval funding. So far, we'd made more progress on the second front rather than the first. With his reintroduction into society, Lord Warnwick had been able to converse with fellow members of Parliament. His implication that his predicament may have been caused by French agents, and that they might have discovered some new magical innovation that would make them even more dangerous if they gained control of the entire continent, had convinced several of the members of Parliament to come over to his side, promising to back him when he called for the vote. But would it be worth it in the end? Or would it backfire? It had seemed all so mathematical when I'd come up with this plan, but people didn't act like the parts of a mathematical equation. They were random and unpredictable and didn't follow set rules, even if society seemed to have more rules than it knew what to do with. Chapter 7. On how I gain an attachment and lose my job. Mostly. A month into the season, Lord Warnwick's invitations hadn't slowed, even if the allergic reactions also hadn't slowed. Apparently, it was now fashionable to carry several spare handkerchiefs in one's reticule in case of a sneezing attack while visiting the fashionable Lord Warnwick. The men weren't exempt from it either. Some began to style their hair in poofs around their heads instead of styled back, mimicking Lord Warnwick's mane. It looked somewhat ridiculous, but at least our campaign was making the right impressions. Still, Parliament was dodging the vote on the war funding. As each day passed without an opportunity to call the vote and get it over with, Lord Warnwick became more and more silent on the subject. In my magic lessons in the evenings, he became curt when he noticed me at all past his distraction. One evening, as we finished up our magic lessons, he sat down in the parlor facing me and gave his squeaking, throat-clearing cough. "Miss Clampton, you have done an admirable job stepping into this odd position in my household, getting it back running smoothly and taking care of the accounts. I have appreciated your hard work immensely." "It has been my pleasure, my lord." I could speak that with complete honesty. After all, he treated me as less a servant and more an extended house guest. He rarely ordered me to do something, and more often than not, I had to remind myself that I was his servant. I still kept that rose curtain dress in my trunk to remind myself of the disgrace occasionally. "I don't want to impose upon you more than I already have." Lord Warnwick tugged at his cravat, as if it were too tight. I didn't see how it could be. Mr. Fenton had a way with cravat knots and flourishes. Lord Warnwick's appearance had been nothing short of proper once he'd come into his service. "I'm willing to help in any way I can. Your generosity in my pay has helped my family more than you could possibly know." Thanks to seeing the accounts, I suspected Lord Warnwick paid me more than was my due, but I hadn't dared mention it. I probably should have been embarrassed to accept such charity, but the money had kept my family out of the poorhouse, and was now being saved to provide something of a dowry for my sisters. None of the money had been put into the estate beyond paying off the last few debts. As the estate was entailed, and wouldn't fall to me or my sisters, I would let the next owner pay for repairs and setting the old house to rights. I only had to worry about my father, my sisters, and our small house in Portsmouth. "You deserve every shilling and then some." Lord Warnwick cleared his throat again. "And while I appreciate the way your plan has restored my good name and helped me return to society even in my current form, I fear that some of the more marriage-minded in society have gained the wrong idea. I fear that if I don't pick a favorite soon, some of the girls might grow even more bold. Some have already done so, even at the risk of their health because of their allergic reactions." I winced. Yes, it would be hard to shake the young ladies from trying their level best to break his curse and gain his fortune. What none of them seemed to realize was that if the rumor we had started was true, trying to win him for such a superficial reason wouldn't break the spell. But it was all false. That wasn't the cure for this spell. No one, except the perpetrators, knew the way to break it. I see. That could turn into a bit of an imposition. I folded my hands tightly in my lap. I wasn't sure why my stomach tightened with nerves. Was it the way his yellow eyes were regarding me? "I was thinking I would have to pick a favorite in order to stave off the flurry. But I can't pick a favorite who would get the wrong impression and believe I am forming an attachment." No, that would cause a problem. If he led a girl on, he could even ruin her chances with a scandal by ending the attachment once the vote was called and he returned to Downshead. But who else wouldn't get the wrong impression by his courtship? "You're the only one besides me and the rest of the staff who knows the full situation and what we are trying to accomplish." Lord Warnwick tugged at his cravat again, his yellow eyes finally swiveling away from me to the floor. "And it would give you a chance to observe those around me yourself and help me figure out who might have caused this." Besides Mr. Doyle's actions earlier this year, I haven't noticed anything suspicious. But then again, I have been so swarmed and distracted, it has been hard to notice anything. I cocked my head. I had been chafing at the confines of staying below stairs with the staff. I shouldn't have. After all, I was part of the staff. It was my place. But I longed to know what was really going on, how the balls were playing out, how each of the men and women at them were looking and acting. There was only so much querying I could do of Lord Warnwick. But how do you plan to pull it off? You can't just produce me from thin air, nor do I have suitable accoutrements for the necessary occasions. Nor was I willing to use the money I was saving for my sister's dowries for personal gain, not even new dresses and all the things I would need to join society. I had already sold most of what I'd worn at my coming out 2 years ago, and what was left was horribly out of date. I would provide anything you would need, Lord Warnwick stated, as if promising hundreds of pounds for dresses for his servant was something he did every day. I couldn't possibly. I'm supposed to be your servant. I'm supposed to be working off the amount my father destroyed when he tore down those curtains. I couldn't help myself. I was babbling. This was all too much to accept from him. Too much generosity. It would be worth it. His yellow eyes were on me again, twin pools of soft gold. He shook himself, ruffling his mane. More than worth it, if you can help me figure out who might have cast this spell. Not only would it do me a great service, but you would aid all of England if my enemy turns out to also be a traitor to our country. Well, if he put it that way, I couldn't really refuse, could I? Catching this spy was paramount. No one could be allowed to go about spelling lords of the realm and tampering with Parliament through the ensuing scandal. This person had to be found, no matter what it took. Even if that meant I would have to re-enter the society I thought I'd left behind the moment I agreed to work for Lord Warnwick. I drew in a deep breath. All right, but let's not get too carried away with the purchasing. I will only need a few gowns, enough to attend a couple of balls at your side. Surely the vote will be coming up soon. Once it does, the danger will be past, and we can return back to Downset and back to our former places. Back into service. I had to remember, like everything in our campaign, this, too, was a deception. The wrong country's flag run up our mast. Someday, we would have to show our true colors. But hopefully, the enemy would show his true colors first. And soon. Outfitting me in the proper dresses for me to join the season caused a few issues. I couldn't simply show up at the dressmaker's, order a few dresses, and ask for them to be put on Lord Warnwick's account. That wouldn't give the correct impression at all, especially with dressmakers being notorious purveyors of gossip. Instead, I took a coach to several of the dressmakers, buying only a dress or two at each, and paying with cash given to me by Lord Warnwick. I still got odd looks, considering it was a month into the season and I was just now buying dresses. More than that, I had to show up at the dressmakers in the ugly rose curtain dress, because it was the only one not in the black service garb. I held my breath the entire time that I wouldn't run into a lord or lady that might recognize the rose curtain pattern as the same one as the curtains in the rose parlor at Downshead. During the week of waiting for at least one of the dresses to finish, Lord Warnwick and I discussed how we were going to handle my accommodations. After all, I didn't have a guardian, and with my father's health being what it was, we couldn't invite him to London to act as my guardian. Nor could we let it be known that I was technically staying at Lord Warnwick's house. We would have to be sneaky about it. That was for sure. I smoothed the skirt of my new pale green morning dress outside of Lord Warnwick's parlor. After changing once a few callers had arrived, I had slipped down the back staircase and wound my way through the unused parts of the house until I could slip into the foyer without being seen. Mrs. Dentley joined me, having agreed to play the part of Mrs. Franklin, my chaperone. Mr. Fenton gave me a nod, then stepped to the door of the parlor.
Miss Rosalie Clampton and her companion, Mrs. Eloise Franklin.
I did my best to glide into the room, keeping my steps smaller than I'd adopted since going into service. I kept my head up, my hands loose at my side in their new gloves. Thankfully, the gloves hid the calluses on my fingers. Lady Wilson was perched on one end of a settee, while Mr. Doyle sat in a chair. Was it odd that the two of them always seemed to end up in the same place? Yet I never saw them together as a couple. Lady Ethelwyle was also there with her granddaughter, a slip of a girl who was holding a handkerchief to her streaming nose and tearing eyes. Allergic to cat, I assumed. Lord Warnwick and Mr. Doyle both rose as I entered. I took the seat on the other side of the settee from Lady Wilson. After a hesitating moment, Mrs. Dentley took a chair near me, clearly uncomfortable at sitting in this room. Lady Wilson eyed me over her teacup. "Miss Clampton, how good of you to join us this morning. Getting a late start to the season?" "Yes, I'm afraid I am." I sipped at my cup and forced myself to smile. We'd already come up with an answer for my late arrival. My father suffered a spell of ill health, but he is better now. We were able to come to enjoy the season for a few weeks, at least. I omitted any mention of where we might be staying. "I'm glad to hear he is much recovered. Our health can be such a precious thing." Lady Wilson pursed her lips in an expression that was probably meant to be sympathetic, but only came across as bored. I gave her a smile back, though I'm sure the expression looked just as insincere on me as hers had on her. Of course. From there, the chatter devolved into small talk, but before the morning was out, I had secured my invitation to Lady Ethelwyle's costume ball the following week. That had been the main goal of my attack, after all. Chapter 8. On How I Cause a Stir at a Ball. The week before the Ethelwyle ball passed far too quickly. The seamstress barely finished my costume gown in time. I had decided on a dress styled after what my mother had worn when she was courting my father. It wasn't that original, going in a style from only a few decades ago, but I didn't care. I didn't want to ask Lord Warnwick to spend money on an elaborate costume. Somehow, Lord Warnwick ended up choosing to go in a naval-style coat, all piping and gold buttons. I was glad he had never seen my parents' wedding portrait. Otherwise, he'd think I was trying to hint at more than I was. On the night of the ball, I slipped from the back door of the house and into the carriage before the stable hand even took it out of the carriage house. Once in there, I stayed away from the windows as it was driven around front, and Lord Warnwick climbed in. As these horses weren't unicorns, they snorted and pranced when they caught a whiff of his predator scent, even if their blinders prevented them from seeing him. Once we reached the Ethelwyle townhouse on Mayfair, we went through the whole thing once again, since Lord Warnwick and I weren't officially courting yet, and thus wouldn't arrive together. Lord Warnwick got out. Then I waited until the carriage was parked out of sight with the other carriages, before I slipped outside and joined the throng of those walking from nearby houses. Inside, a footman took my cloak and hat, and I followed the sound of music to the bathroom. Lady Ethelwyle knew how to throw a rousing party, though perhaps I shouldn't have been surprised. She did love her Gothic novels and excitement, after all. 3 tables of refreshments lined one wall, while an orchestra played the music for the dancers. As agreed, Lord Warnwick didn't ask me for my first dance or my second. I hadn't thought I would even have a partner for either of those, but Mr. Doyle asked me to dance nearly the moment I stepped inside.
"Tell me, Miss Clampton, where have you been hiding all these months? I haven't seen you enjoying our London sights, or even around Portsmouth," he asked as he led me through the dance steps. We had to part to dip and turn around our neighbor before coming together again. By that point, I had my fake smile well in place. As I mentioned at tea the other day, my father has been ill. The hard life in the Navy wears on a body, even if he has now inherited an estate. I had to stay home and care for him. "You are a very dutiful daughter, Miss Clampton. Your loyalty to your father is to be commended."
Mr. Doyle's smile might not have contained the fangs of Lord Warnwick's, but it gave me a few more chills. No, not chills. Vibrations. Magic. I concentrated, trying to pinpoint what I was feeling. Was I sensing Mr. Doyle's connection with magic? Or did he simply have a spell on something of his? But if he did have something magicked, it shouldn't keep vibrating like it was in use. Once a spell was cast, the magic returned to its normal background buzz. Lord Warnwick had explained that it was possible once the magical senses were attuned to sense when another person has magic, especially if their ability with magic was strong. Over the past few weeks, I had begun to sense Lord Warnwick's magic, but his was the only one I had experience with. His was usually like a low hum, almost a purr in the background of the rest of the vibrations surrounding me. Did that mean Mr. Doyle was also a magiologist? What did that mean for our suspicions of him? Was he involved in the spell on Lord Warnwick? Yet Mr. Doyle didn't feel terribly strong, not the way Lord Warnwick did. How could he cast a spell so strong and unbreakable that all of the best magiologists of Oxford and the Academy couldn't break it? It was something to report to Lord Warnwick when I got the chance, but not here, not where others could overhear. Once the dance ended, I wandered over to the refreshment table. Lord Warnwick wandered the same way, and when he reached me, he acted like it was purely coincidence that we ended up at the same place at the same time. He gave me a half bow and held out his hand, much as he had done in his parlor when we'd practiced dancing. "May I have this dance, Miss Clampton?" I would be delighted, and let him lead me onto the floor with the other dancers. When the music began, I couldn't help but be swept away. Lord Warnwick had improved since our practice session, probably due to all the practice he'd had at recent balls. For a man in a cat's body, he was surprisingly light on his paws now, moving with all the grace of a feline. It was strangely enchanting somehow. I couldn't let him realize that. Any attachment we were forming had to be fake. Nothing more. It didn't do me any good to pine over him. He was an earl. I would go back to being his servant in a few months or weeks. I had no connections, no money of my own that I wasn't saving for my sister's dowries. This was all a show. Yet it didn't feel like one, as he swept me through each step. Nor did it feel like a show when he danced with me 2 more times, just to make sure everyone saw that I was clearly his favorite. At the end of the night, he escorted me to the door before I made my escape to go hide in the carriage to catch my ride back to his house and my room in the servants' wings. When we reached his house, I fled to my room. I couldn't help it. I needed the reminder of the small room, the rose-curtain dress, to make sure I remembered why I was doing this and what couldn't happen. He was a beast, maybe permanently. I was a servant, maybe permanently. There were a lot of things that couldn't ever be, and this was one of them. I could be logical, mathematics, science, magic. Those were the sorts of problems I could puzzle out. But this? The strange flutters now pitching and rolling in my stomach were a problem that couldn't be solved like a simple calculus problem. This problem had no solution. I didn't like problems without solutions. I would just have to make a solution to this one, somehow, even if I had to bend a few more rules to do it. Chapter 9. On how my attachment progresses. After the ball hosted by Lord and Lady Ethelwyle, the invitations poured in. Since I didn't have an official residence, I had to deflect the queries of callers when they met me at morning tea at Lord Warnwick's parlor. I couldn't give them a card or direct them to a place to send their invite. Instead, I played coy, mysterious. Somehow, that mystery around me made me more popular than I had ever been in my previous season in Portsmouth. Between being an obvious favorite of Lord Warnwick and the mystery, I rose in society's eyes much as Lord Warnwick had, thanks to our campaign. It got me thinking. Perhaps, if this worked, I might end up with a match from all of this after all. Maybe this was my opportunity to marry well and provide for my sisters, even if I was more than indebted to Lord Warnwick for essentially giving me this second coming out. I couldn't ask for more generosity. Over the course of the next 2 weeks, I attended several balls with Lord Warnwick. We also went to the theater. In the 3rd week, Lord Warnwick took me out to the stables. "Would you like to go riding in Hyde Park, Miss Clampton?" "I would love to. I have been missing the parkland around Downshead." I glanced along the stalls, wondering if he'd brought along the same brown palfrey that Lady Wilson had used at the house party. At the far end of the stables, a horse poked its head from the stall. No, not a horse. A unicorn. one of the sturdy Welsh ones with a brown shaggy mane and coat. I tiptoed down the aisle toward it. Why hadn't I seen this unicorn before? Surely I would have noticed if Lord Warnwick had more than one unicorn. I touched the unicorn's muzzle. He blew against my palm, then rubbed his horn along my shoulder. I scratched at the horn's base, causing his head to bob up and down and his eyes to flutter with contentment. This is a sweet little thing. I haven't seen him before. That's because I just bought him. Lord Warnwick stepped closer behind me. The unicorn looked up, blew in and out, then turned its focus back on me, as if deciding that Lord Warnwick wasn't a threat. Would you like to ride him? Me? My hand paused on the unicorn's neck. Really? Yes. He won't spook around me the way another riding horse would. We wouldn't be able to ride in Hyde Park like a couple forming an attachment if you were on a regular horse. Lord Warnwick waved to the next stall, where his unicorn was eyeing the two of us as if jealous. I see. Did that mean he'd just bought this unicorn because of me? It was too much. Even a Welsh unicorn was expensive, though less expensive than a foreign-bred one. But I couldn't refuse such an offer now that it was made. I would be delighted. While the stable hands saddled the unicorns, I changed into a riding dress. I had questioned the need to make one, but Lord Warnwick had insisted we weren't going to skimp. When I was ready, I joined Lord Warnwick. The Welsh unicorn was small enough that I didn't need a boost into the saddle. Lord Warnwick's unicorn towered over mine, but I didn't care. I was riding a unicorn, a short, barrel-chested Welsh one, and he was as regal to me as any foreign delicate one. We arrived at Hyde Park quickly and set the unicorns to a leisurely walk. Hyde Park was a beauty to behold even at this time of year. As we rode, we saw a few other couples and greeted them. After nearly an hour, I nodded at a pair of horses ahead of us, keeping my movements subtle. Isn't that Lady Wilson and Mr. Doyle? Lord Warnwick nodded. It appears so. They were coming towards us, so we didn't change our unicorn's speed or direction. I was curious as to what they might want. As we drew closer, my unicorn snorted and shied away from them. Lord Warnwick's unicorn did the same after another moment or two. What was Lady Wilson's and Mr. Doyle's connection to each other? Why were they always in company? And why were the unicorns so nervous? Lady Wilson drew her palfrey to a stop. I see you are having a spot of trouble with your mounts. Perhaps riding isn't the best pursuit for certain individuals. I assure you, we should regain control of them directly. Lord Warnwick stared down his cat's muzzle at the pair, his paws firm on his unicorn's rein. Perhaps it would be best if we moved on, then. Unicorns can get dangerous when testy. Lady Wilson directed her horse around us. As she passed me, she sent me such a glare. I was almost sure that she was going to sprout claws in a minute or two. Once again, I sensed a vibration. Was it coming from her or from him? Could they sense that I now had a vibration thanks to my practice of magic? Probably. And if they were up to something nefarious, that was knowledge I would rather they didn't have. As they moved out of earshot, Lord Warnwick turned to me, our unicorns now calm. That was puzzling indeed. Yes. I stared after them. Something wasn't right here. Did it have to do with Lord Warnwick's situation, or something else? I wasn't sure how to flesh them out if it was. We had done everything we could to force Lord Warnwick's enemy to step out of the shadows, but so far, the person who had spelled him to keep him from Parliament hadn't taken any further action, even though it looked like the vote for war funding might come up any day, and Lord Warnwick would definitely be there. Over the past few weeks, he'd strengthened his coalition, and he was almost certain that when the vote was called, it would pass both houses. Surely an enemy dangerous enough to put a nearly unbreakable spell on Lord Warnwick didn't like that he was so close to achieving his aims in Parliament. A French agent wouldn't want the vote to go through, as it would mean a continuation of the Peninsula Campaign and the naval war. Both were damaging to the French. So why hadn't the enemy revealed his plan yet? Surely he would make a move soon. Yet he seemed content to remain in the shadows. I wasn't sure why that was. But whatever the reason, it couldn't be good. I hope you enjoyed listening to Torn Curtains, Part 2 by Tara Grayce, narrated by Karyne Norton. Don't forget to snag the free novellas when you sign up for her newsletter on her website at taragrace.com. If you can't wait a week to hear the final installment of Torn Curtains, you can grab it there. Also, make sure you go check out this month's giveaway with 4 Romantasy audiobooks and a 3-month Audible subscription. You can enter to win at findingfantasyreads.com/giveaway. If you're enjoying listening to the Finding Fantasy Reads podcast, I think there's a good chance you'll enjoy listening to my other podcast, Blood of the Stars, which is simply the audiobook of my debut novel broken down into podcast episodes. You can find it on all the same podcasting platforms under Blood of the Stars, or you can listen on my website at karynnorton.com/audio. I'll also have easy links in the show notes. Thank you all for listening, and happy reading.